Welcome to On the Right Side of History with Kansans for Life. Come with us as we connect the pro-life movement's past to present, uncover hidden or forgotten history, and its connections to the battle still raging today. Now, here's our host, Danielle Underwood.
Hi, everyone. Today, I'm speaking with Congressman Ron Estes and Kansas State Representative Susan Estes. Yes, that's right. For those of you in parts of Kansas that are not near the Wichita area, you may not realize we have a married couple in our state who are simultaneously serving in elected office. I invited them to join us today on the podcast to give us a glimpse into what life is like for a political power couple, both personally and professionally. Welcome, Congressman Estes and Representative Estes.
Well, great. Thank you for having me on today. It's great to be able to talk with all of the folks that are participating in the pro-life movement and across the state. And this is actually the second time in the last few months that I've been able to do one of these interviews with the other Representative Estes, Susan. And it's great to be able to do that and look forward to being able to talk about some of the issues that are going on right now.
Absolutely. We're so glad to be here. Thank you.
And so, Congressman Estes, you are right now in Washington, D.C., and Representative Estes, you are at home in Wichita, and you're both joining us from remotely through Zoom, so we're glad to have you together. This is a fun opportunity. So just for a little quick background for our listeners, Congressman Estes is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, representing Kansas's 4th Congressional District since 2017. Before Congress, he served as Kansas State Treasurer for 7 years and has roots in both farming and the aerospace industry. And Representative Susan Estes was elected to represent District 87 in 2022. Before assuming elected office, she worked as a teacher, a market researcher, and in business development. Did I miss anything important for either one of you?
No, I think that's great to be able to talk about our bios. And I think one of the things I know that I've seen from here is that being able to have that experience from the real world in the working world has been certainly been beneficial for me, and I assume it's been beneficial for Susan in our roles in elective office as well.
My career paths directly line up with my committee assignments because I'm very passionate about literacy and where we see children in Kansas going in the future. And so I get to serve on appropriations, but most importantly, education and the education budget committees. So I'm very thankful for those opportunities.
Wonderful. So can we start for a second with a little bit of personal? I'm curious how the two of you met and also how long you've been married.
We each have a different version of that. And my version is we were at a Young Republican convention and he asked me to change his name tag and mine got changed. And I don't know if he wants to tell his version or you want me to tell it.
Oh, go ahead.
I invited him to lunch and we went out to lunch and I realized I had forgotten my purse, so he had to pay. And he's been paying ever since his version.
Oh,
and
boy.
honestly, both of those versions are true. And it's been 32 years and 6 children. I'm sorry, 3 children. Not all of our children survived to birth, so we typically say 3.
And one of the things she left out in that story was we were at a Young Republican National Convention when we met. And the other piece that's correlated to that is she says we share the same sickness of being involved in politics and working.
Well, I was thinking that you have been at this for quite a while, if you met back then, and this was just the beginnings of your very fruitful relationship. So what a beautiful
We were
gift.
both grassroots people. Either one of us never really expected to run for office. And God just sometimes has a different plan, and he's getting you ready for it, the experiences that he gives you. And I think we're both very much where we should be, and we enjoy what we get to do.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask about you said that you have 6 children and 3 have survived. Do you mind sharing that?
We had 3 miscarriages. And then we have been blessed with 3 beautiful children, and they're all adults now. And our baby just graduated from college.
Congratulations to you. So that gives you a very personal tie to the pro-life movement. That really, I find so many times that people do have a very personal commitment for a variety of reasons, but so often it is because they've seen firsthand what that value of life is like, and sometimes it comes through loss. So I'm sorry for your loss, but I love how you've turned this into a beautiful launch pad for you guys to do the work that you've done at both the federal and state levels. So the second question I wanted to ask you is how your experience has been balancing your work as elected officials and how you've balanced that with the needs of your family.
Do you want to take that one first?
Sure, I'll take it. I'll talk a little bit about it. Is obviously there's some impact and some decisions you have to make in terms of what you do and how you do the work, as well as a commitment to family time and being able to do things with your family and be there. It's a little bit, to some degree, it's tougher being here in DC and being able to fly back and forth in terms of getting back with things that are going on in the family aspect. But I also, one of the things I noticed, and I probably didn't realize it till near the end of my term as state treasurer, just the impact even of being in state, but spending a lot of time in Topeka as opposed to being at home. When one of our kids mentioned that, or asked the question of whether I was going to be away from home or in Congress than I was when I was state treasurer. So some of those things you subtly don't pick up on until, in some cases, maybe it's too late, but it's always an ongoing issue that I know all of us here that serve in office have to figure out how do you have that right mix of professional and political life, but also how do you blend in the right amount of time with family.
And I would add that because with our priorities that go God, family, country, and God will help you figure the rest of it out. And because I think we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, we make it work. When he was in Topeka, I very comfortable being very self-sufficient, and it was very quick for him to get home from Topeka if we needed something. And we figured out things like taking pictures of the kids' math homework to send to him. I think that was a hard part, was like learning how to make sure that we both co-parented equally. And you make it work. And we are blessed with just the neatest kids who have supported us in what we do and give us a lot of grace, because we don't always get it right, and you just have to sit down as a family and listen to each other.
That's wonderful. I'm sure your children have such a high opinion of you too, and are so proud of what their parents have contributed to our world, to our nation, to our state. So the last personal question I wanted to ask you before we move on to some more of what you've done in policy, I'm wondering who brought up the idea of Susan, you running for the Kansas House while, Ron, you are serving in Congress. And, what was that conversation like?
Throughout the years, different people have talked to me about running for local things, but Ron was already serving at that time, and our children were really young, and we just didn't feel that they needed both of us serving at the same time. So when our youngest was a senior in high school, I got called about this seat that I'm in now because Renee Erickson was running for the Senate, and I said, it's not the right time. Grace is still at home. And I got off the phone. I didn't know she had come home. And she called me down and sat me down on the couch and said that it was time. So, and another couple that Ron and I visited with that's served simultaneously, and the wife was in Congress and the husband was in the state Senate. They gave us a lot of encouragement and insight to what their experience had been. So I think those things and a lot of prayer helped figure out what we were supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that story as well is that most of our friends from years ago, 25 and 30 years ago, that we worked with either on the political side or grassroots activism in general, probably all of them seemed to think that Susan was going to run for office before I was.
Mm.
So it actually just the
Oh.
way the plans worked out and the way things happened is I got elected first, and as Susan mentioned, she's always had an interest in being more engaged in what's going on, and it's great that this opportunity's come up and for her to be able to do that as well, to do something she really loves in areas that she really likes.
Hmm. I bet you all have wonderful tabletop discussions over dinner. I bet family dinners are just wild at your home.
Sometimes it's really nice not to talk about politics, though.
Mm. And then I thought of one additional question before I move on. And I'm wondering, Congressman Estes, what are some of the things that Representative Estes has done and all those years leading up to her entry into actual elected office, to what were some of the best things she did to support you as you were giving your service?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is as you go through being involved in politics, being in elected office, you end up having to spend time away from home. I mean, it's not just spending time in the office during office hours when things are happening, or in the legislature when during a legislative session, but it's also going out in the evenings on weekends to actually be engaged in whatever's going on in a constituent world, whether it's meeting people individually or going to groups. So, when I was in office, whether it was as county treasurer or state treasurer, and even early on in Congress, Susan was there to actually make sure that some things got taken care of for the kids and the family and what was going on. And then when I was first elected to Congress, Susan, before she was in the Kansas House, she spent a lot of time in D.C. And it was really beneficial to have her here. One, because she loves history and the aspect going on here, but actually helping build those working relationships, in a lot of cases, me with the members and Susan working with the spouses as well. But she did a lot of tours around the DC area, not just the Capitol, but also the White House and other parts of our great country and the historical aspects. And actually, if you want a Capitol tour or a White House tour, Susan's the renowned expert here in terms of being able to go through and do that.
Well, now we know.
And it helped me a lot because we see more of our friends in DC than we do here. I was shocked to discover how many people go to DC. And again, this is sometimes God's preparing you for something that you don't know you're going to need, but to listen to people to go to DC and explain to him what he needed was very helpful to me when I started making policy decisions, because I had heard from them already, and my learning curve was faster because of what I learned from hanging out with him. But I was always the kind of person to fill a busload of people up and go to the Capitol or go to City Hall. So all those experiences were helpful. I'm very grateful for those opportunities.
That's wonderful. And I was talking with some teammates of mine today, and we were realizing that each of you represents the other one. So, yeah, that's it. So you are representing Congressman Estes at the state level, and you, sir, are representing your wife at the federal level. So that's kind of fun. Okay, so now that we've heard your perspectives on personal, we would like to talk about some policy things and fighting for life in the political arena as a married couple. So first of all, you've both been strong, consistent defenders of life. You've both been very outspoken in your pro-life beliefs, and you're very eloquent in the way that you state what you believe about life. So I'm wondering, how did the overturn of Roe, which sent the regulation of abortion back to the states, how did it affect your work at both the federal and state levels? Let's start at the federal level.
So, both Susan and I were actively involved in Kansans for Life long before we ran for office. Either one of us ran for office. It just involvement because it was the right issue to be engaged in, and actually we worked so many. In some cases, it was much more Susan's work to help other people get elected and to be able to help carry that banner forward. And then now that we've seen the Dobbs decision implemented and being part of the law of the land, if you will, through that process, I think there's a whole lot of things that we need to keep focused on. The unfortunate part we've seen out of that is as decisions are being made now at state levels, we're seeing states that, with Dobbs having the opportunity to say that there's a floor under federal standard, not a ceiling, in terms of what statutes the states can put in effect, and you have states like Texas that puts in a heartbeat protection bill with 100% exceptions for the life of the mother, which is something that I've always advocated for. Mm-hmm. But the downside of that is we've seen that over 14,000 people have come in from out of state into Kansas to have abortions because an incorrectly and falsely stated position that the Kansas Supreme Court has taken on having the right of abortion embedded in the Constitution that is 150 years old in the state of Kansas, and so one of the things I think we've also seen out of this is that we on the pro-life side, I think we cheered and thought we'd won a big battle with the Dobbs decision, whereas some of the forces that really are advocates for abortion and that make money off of abortion, they saw it as just a next step up in the fight, and so we've got to refocus ourselves, folks all across the country, in terms of what we do and how we engage and our activism against that, because the folks on the other side are very active and continuing to work strongly against that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I see it as our focus needs to change a little bit. For so long, we've been engaged on Dobbs, and we haven't been talking so much about what's our next steps in our work. And I think a lot of what we need to do is help people to understand that we truly do care about and support the children whose lives we're trying to defend. And I think our work in the state legislature reflected that this year. Under Clinton, he used to use the phrase rare and safe, and we've gotten away from that. And I think that needs to be part of our conversation when we talk about legislation. What can we do to help women who would like to keep their children? And I think, and we've been doing a lot of those things at both the federal and the state level. We have a lot of wonderful programs who provide financial resources and medical resources to expectant mothers and after they have their children. But most pro-life people aren't aware of what that is. And I asked our legislative research department at the Capitol to create a list for me of what all is available. And I was surprised when it came out to be a 3-page list. And at the same time, we have a lot of crisis pregnancy centers, and we are probably familiar with the ones in our area, but we're not exactly sure what they do. So I think one of the things that we as pro-life activists need to do to get better is becoming more aware and having that information in one central location, so that as people we know are unexpectedly pregnant or having difficulties, we've got the answers that they need right at their fingertips. So I think that's one change as a result of Dobbs, and I think that's an area where we can do better. And I think my favorite legislation this year, all three of a certain bundle of bills help to research what we can do to help women keep their babies. What problems are they having? The second one helps them to save money for an adoption before they get the adoption, because sometimes families were waiting up to 3 years to get their adoption tax credit money. And that's hard. Adoptions have gotten insanely expensive. One person that testified, they spent $70,000 because everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and it was a private adoption, but they were adopting a child born to an addicted mother. And we've increased what you can get back in the adoption tax credit. So those are the types of things that I think we need to do. The other thing that we did that I think is important is we increased by 30% what we're paying doctors who treat women on Medicaid. We were paying an OBGYN visit $17. It's hard to get a doctor who will take those patients. So they've locked, in my mind, long before we expand Medicaid, we need to get what we're paying to the doctors who are willing to take Medicaid patients up, so that those who need it the most have a chance to get it.
Thank you so much for that, your thoughts on those. That kind of really just dovetails into my next question for you, and that is, what are the most important ways you believe you've been able to impact life issues throughout your time in office? And so you've already begun speaking to that, Representative. So I wonder if you want to. You've also been involved in legislation, not only this session but the previous session. So I wonder if you want to continue along with that, and then we'll ask Congressman. We'd ask you the same question as well.
From the get-go, the very first week that Ron and I moved to Kansas, we called Kansans for Life, and that's where my friendship with David Gittridge was born, and I miss him a lot. So we've been in Kansas, close to 30 years now, and so during that 30 years, collectively, we've worked on helping to get pro-life candidates, looked at just kind of what's out there, what could we be doing differently, and then being in the State House legislatively, it's been just so great to have a direct path to supporting policy. In my first 2 years, you sit there and you learn how the building works, and then you start getting your voice. You vote right, because that's critically important. Nothing happens if you don't have enough votes, but those first 2 years you learn.
You helped to pass the Born Alive protections.
Yes, that's correct. When Ron and I lived in Massachusetts, the abortion debate is a very different circumstance there, because it is such a strongly pro-abortion state that that was the issue. You had a little window to actually repeal abortion there. So here in Kansas, it was not a topic that I ever thought that we would have to discuss. And I don't know how you can look at a person who is outside of the mother and say, you don't deserve to live. And those who supported abortion tried to paint us as doing a bad thing because that child was going to do anyway. And they completely ignored the fact that there are people like Melissa Oden who have survived abortions, and they're a wonderful part of our community. And we have to give people a chance to live. I never thought that would be an issue in Kansas.
And I also am impressed with your support of the anti-coercion bill that passed this session. I think that was another very important measure to protect women from, potential abusers, human traffickers, so many different situations where they're put at risk from coerced abortions.
Well, unfortunately, here in Wichita, that is a circumstance where a boyfriend had an underage girlfriend, and he did not want to get convicted of statutory rape. So she was taken out of Wichita to a field in Butler County and murdered while she was pregnant because she refused to get an abortion. So the coercion thing to me was, again, not a debate that I thought should have been as complicated as it was in the beginning. But I think it's important that when women say, I want to have my children, that we support them as much as possible.
And Congressman, please tell us, what are you most proud of in the work that you've done to support life?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm doing is, I've sponsored and lead sponsor on a bill protecting individuals with Down syndrome. And I've introduced it again last January for this session, and have done that the last 3 years and going through the process. There's a companion bill in the Senate that's being led by Senator Daines, trying to just just make it the law of the land that you cannot kill a baby just because the testing has shown that they have Down syndrome. And it's something that, as we talk about the quality of life, and we talk about what kind of culture do we want to have, to supporting people with different abilities and structures and the life experiences that they want to have, we shouldn't go out and actually look at avenues to make things simple to end the life of that unborn baby just because of that potential diagnosis. And it's unfortunately that we're seeing in the United States a tendency and even seeing an increase in people that thinks it's acceptable to have an abortion if there's a diagnosis of Down syndrome. But what we see over and over again with folks, and I have fellow members of Congress who actually have children with Down syndrome, and it's one of those things that they love their children, all of their children, and it's an important part of their life. And I really got started in this before I was in Congress. When I was Kansas State Treasurer, there was a piece of legislation going through Congress to create what's called the ABLE account, which was basically an account patterned after the college savings program, which I was administering as state treasurer, or patterned after health savings account, where parents and individuals can save money for their own education or medical expenses or housing using an account that actually allows them to set it aside tax-free and actually protects them as they go through and grow some assets that they can then use to help be independent and care for themselves when they become adults. And so that's an important piece that I actually, as state treasurer, ended up coming up here a couple of times to Congress to talk through, here's some ways to structure that, here's some ways not to structure that, and was able to create the ABLE account program within Kansas when I was still state treasurer and get that up and running. So that's one of those things that I'm proud of, to be able to say that we've given people the opportunity to be independent, to lead an independent life, and to take care of themselves in a manner in which they want to.
I think both of those things are fantastic. I have a person very close to us who has Down syndrome, and I can concur that her life is beautiful, and she brings so much love and life into to our family and to our community. And also, I know firsthand that those ABLE accounts are essential for people with disabilities. So, I mean, we really are talking about the human rights of every human person and the value of every human person. So I applaud you both for the work you're doing at both the federal and state level to really move us towards a culture of life and not away from it. So thank you so much. So really, is there anything else you would want to share with us as before we wrap up today about your message?
Well, I tell you, there are a lot of wonderful friendships that we have formed through the years with folks that we've worked with at Kansans for Life. And I know that I just have a huge appreciation for those relationships. And there's so much I have learned from so many different people who are involved with Kansans for Life. I really value that KFL is there to lead the way and keep us united and going forward constructively.
Yeah, I think that's very true. The friendships and the relationships you developed along the way, and I'd also add in the mix of that is that the battle's not done. I mean, we still have lots of work to do in the pro-life side, and actually in some cases maybe more work still, because based on the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, is now lots of decisions are being made at the state level. So there's 50 states plus the territories that actually are going to weigh in on what they want to do, and we're going to have to continue to do that. And we're looking at all sorts of things that come up. At the federal level, we still run into all sorts of policies and decisions, things like mifepristone, that is being able to get an abortion through the mail without ever seeing a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to talk through issues like that, where the pro-abortion folks that are actually advocating that, completely have ignored the FDA rulings that 1 out of 25 women that take that are at risk of being ended up in an emergency room. And those are the type of issues that we need to continue to work on.
So true. You're exactly right. Well, thank you both for your leadership. We value you so much. We appreciate everything you do. We really look to you and your strong voices on the issues, everything pertaining to life, all of these different things that tie together to give us that consistent view that we value every human life. So on behalf of Kansans for Life, thank you, Congressman Estes and Representative Estes, for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and your thoughts with us.
All right.
Well, great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Thank you for letting us be on together to actually talk about some of our legislative
Yeah,
issues.
so fun.
Thank
It was fun to hear some of the background, some of your personal, how you two met and fell in love. Well, thank you also to everyone listening today. 3 things you can do today to help us reach more listeners. You can leave a review, you can subscribe, and you can share this episode with a friend. Stay connected with us at kfl.org and by following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok at Kansans for Life. And as we say goodbye, never forget, the pro-life movement is on the right side of history. Truth always wins in the end. We hope you'll join us next time.